There's a certain kind of quiet that settles into a place you've built with your own two hands. It's not silence. Silence is an absence. This quiet is a presence. It's the gentle hum of the industrial coolers, the distant groan of a truck shifting in the loading bay, the whisper of dust motes dancing in the shafts of late afternoon sun cutting through the high windows of my warehouse. For 45 years, this quiet has been the soundtrack to my life. I'm Malcolm, I'm 68 years old, and this place, Apex Logistics, is my life's work. I built it from one rusty van and a rented garage into a 20-acre nerve center that moves goods across half the country, and in all those years the quiet was my partner. It was peaceful until the day it wasn't, until the day the quiet was shattered not by a sound but by a single piece of paper left on my desk. It was a Tuesday. I remember that because Tuesdays are my day for a full-site walkthrough, a habit from the old days. I like to feel the concrete under my boots, smell the diesel and cardboard, see the faces of the men and women who depend on this place, who depend on me. I finished my rounds a little after 4, feeling that familiar weary satisfaction that comes from a day's honest work. I headed back to my office, a glass-walled box overlooking the main floor, my own little command deck. I was thinking about the steak I was going to grill for dinner, maybe call up my old army buddy Frank, the simple pleasures of a man my age. I pushed open my office door, and that's when I saw it. It was lying dead center on my leather desk blotter, placed where it was impossible to miss. A thick, cream-colored document folded neatly. It was a deed, a quitclaim deed, to be precise. And it was for this property, all 20 acres. The buildings, the equipment, everything. It was a legal instrument designed to transfer ownership of Apex Logistics, free and clear. The new owner, according to the neatly typed line, was Leo Vance, my nephew. And on the signature line, where my name should have been, was a clumsy, almost pathetic forgery of it. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was a deep, physical cold. It started in my stomach and spread outwards, a wave of ice water flooding my veins. I picked up the paper. The ink was still fresh, slightly tacky to the touch. I stared at my own name, mongled and misshapen, Malcolm Sterling. He'd gotten the M all wrong, too much loop, not enough point. The S's was shaky, hesitant. It was like looking at a funhouse mirror reflection of myself, distorted and ugly. Leo. My sister Sarah's boy, the kid I'd bounced on my knee, the one I'd taught to tie his shoes, the one I'd bailed out of every scrape and bad decision he'd ever made. He thought I was just a doddering old logistics manager, a walking wallet with a bad memory. He thought I was too old, too tired, too stupid to notice he was trying to steal my entire world out from under me. He forgot what my business is. My business is logistics. It's the science of knowing where everything is, at all times, and for insurance purposes, for the simple, boring, practical purpose of protecting my assets. I have every square inch of this place, under 24/7, 4K, high-definition video surveillance. I didn't need a handwriting expert. I had a motion picture, and I knew, with a certainty that was as cold and hard as the forged signature on that deed, that I was about to watch the stupidest movie ever made. It was the story of how my nephew forgot who I was, and I was about to give him a reminder that would last him the rest of his life. I didn't rush. The fury was there, a hot coal behind my ribs, but on the surface I was calm. 45 years in logistics teaches you that panic is a useless luxury. You assess, you plan, you execute. I walked over to my credenza, poured myself 2 fingers of the good scotch I keep for sealing big contracts, and sat down in my worn leather chair, the chair I'd been sitting in since 1988. It sighed as I sat, a familiar, comforting sound. The deed lay on the blotter, an obscene guest in my private sanctuary. I took a slow sip of the scotch, letting the burn chase away some of the chill. Then I turned to my computer, clicked a few icons, and brought up the security feed for my office. The timeline was easy to navigate. I knew I'd locked up at 6 o'clock the previous evening, and I was the first one in this morning at 7. The motion-activated log showed a single event during the night, 2:17 a.m. My office door. I clicked on it. The video that bloomed to life on my 32-inch monitor was so clear it was nauseating. It was like watching a ghost. The door swung open, and there he was, Leo, my nephew. He was wearing a dark hoodie, but he didn't bother pulling it up. Why would he? He thought he was invisible. He let himself in with a key, a copied key, my key. I felt a fresh pang of betrayal. I'd given him a key years ago, for emergencies. For a while he'd worked here, a disastrous 6-month stint, where he'd managed to misroute 3 shipments to the wrong continent. I'd revoked his official privileges, but I never asked for the key back. A stupid, sentimental oversight. A family key. He used it like a burglar. He moved into the frame, confident, almost arrogant. He didn't rifle through drawers or look for cash. He had a singular purpose. He walked straight to my desk, sat in my chair, and pulled a folder from under his sweatshirt. He took out the deed and a piece of scrap paper. Then he picked up one of my own pens from the desk holder, and he started to practice. For 10 solid minutes, the camera recorded it all in perfect, unforgiving 4K. He'd stare at the letterhead on one of my documents, then try to replicate my signature. He'd scribble, then hold it up to the light, scowling. He'd crumple up the paper and start again. I could see the frustration on his face, the sweat beading on his forehead under the fluorescent glow of the desk lamp he'd switched on. He was chewing his lower lip, a nervous habit he's had since he was a kid. Seeing that tiny familiar gesture in this context felt like a physical blow. This wasn't some stranger, this was Sarah's boy chewing his lip as he plotted to ruin me. Finally, after half a dozen failed attempts, he seemed to decide it was good enough. He straightened the deed, took a deep breath, and slowly, painstakingly traced my name onto the signature line. He held it up, a grim, self-satisfied smile on his face. He'd done it. He'd conquered the old man. He carefully folded the document, placed it in the center of the blotter, switched off the lamp, and let himself out, closing the door softly behind him. The video ended. The office was empty and quiet again, but it was a different quiet now. It was the quiet of a tomb. I sat there for a long time, the scotch forgotten in my hand. The rage was a tide, rising and falling, but beneath it was a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight on my chest. This wasn't just about a building, it was about 40 years of history, of love, of misplaced trust. My mind unspooled, rewinding further than the security footage. I was thinking about my sister Sarah. She was 2 years younger than me, the bright, bubbly one. I was the stoic, serious older brother. Our parents had always treated her like spun glass, and me like a workhorse. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. When she got pregnant with Leo out of wedlock, a huge scandal in our small town back then, I was the one who stood by her. I was the one who gave her a job, who helped her find an apartment. When she got sick, really sick, with the cancer that would eventually take her, I was the one who paid for the experimental treatments, who drove her to every appointment, who held her hand when the doctors gave us the final terrible news. I remember my last conversation with her, clear as day. She was so frail, a ghost in a hospital bed. She grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Promise me, Mal," she'd whispered, her voice raspy. "Promise me you'll look after my boy. He's got a good heart, but he's weak. He needs a strong hand to guide him. Don't let him fall." And I promised. What else could I do? I looked at my dying sister, the only family I had left besides her son, and I promised. And I kept that promise. Oh God, did I keep it? That promise became a blank check for Leo's entire life. When he dropped out of college, I paid his rent for a year while he found himself. When he crashed his car, I bought him a new one. When he got into a hole with a bookie, a 5-figure hole, I met 2 very unpleasant gentlemen in a parking garage and made it go away. Each time I'd sit him down. I'd try to talk to him, to give him that strong hand. Sarah had talked about, "Leo, you can't keep doing this. You need to take responsibility. You need to build something for yourself." And he'd nod, his eyes filled with what I thought was remorse. He'd say all the right things. I know, Uncle Mal. You're right. This is the last time, I swear. And I, remembering that hospital room, remembering my sister's desperate eyes, would believe him. Or I'd choose to believe him. The gratitude never lasted. Within a few weeks, the remorse would curdle back into his default setting, entitlement. He saw my help, not as a lifeline, but as an obligation. My success wasn't something I had earned, it was a resource he was entitled to. It's not like you can't afford it, he'd say with a shrug, as if my 45 years of sweat and risk were nothing more than a winning lottery ticket I'd stumbled upon. The real turning point, the one that probably led us here, happened about 6 months ago. He came to me with a business proposal. He wanted to get into high-end electronics import-export. It was all buzzwords and vague projections. He needed $100,000 for a bridge loan to secure his first container of merchandise. He was animated, excited, more passionate than I'd ever seen him. But my gut, the same gut that had helped me navigate 45 years of shark-infested business waters, was screaming at me. The numbers didn't add up. The suppliers he mentioned were ghosts online. It was a sham, a fantasy. For the first time, I didn't just write a check. I said no. I told him it was a bad investment. I told him if he wanted to start a business, he should start small, like I did. I offered him a management track job here, at Apex, with a real salary, real responsibilities. A chance to learn, to build. He looked at me as if I'd slapped him. His face, which had been so full of false excitement, hardened into a mask of pure resentment. A job, he sneered. Working for you? I don't want a job, Uncle Mal. I want a stake. I want what I'm owed. Owed? The word hung in the air between us. I asked him, calmly, what exactly he thought he was owed. Everything, he said, his voice quiet and venomous. Mom always said you'd take care of me. This place, it should have been partly hers. That means it's partly mine. That was the moment. The moment the veil finally lifted. He didn't see the 45 years of my life poured into this place. He saw it as an inheritance he'd been cheated out of. He saw me not as his savior, but as his obstacle. I told him to get out of my office. He left, and the silence he left behind was heavy with a new kind of poison. Now sitting here watching the video of him practicing my name like a schoolboy cheating on a test, it all made a sick kind of sense. The refusal of the loan wasn't a lesson, it was a declaration of war. He decided if I wouldn't give him what he was owed, he would simply take it. The grief in my chest began to cool, to harden. It was changing shape, solidifying from a formless ache into something sharp and focused. It was the birth of a cold, clear resolve. The promise I made to Sarah was to look after her boy, to guide him. It was not a suicide pact. It was not a promise to stand by and watch him destroy me with a stolen key and a forged signature. It wasn't about revenge, I told myself, trying to hold on to the man I used to be. It was about justice. It was about protecting my legacy. But as I saved a copy of the video to a secure encrypted hard drive, I felt a flicker of something else, something hotter and more satisfying. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet, anyway, but it was going to be. The first call I made wasn't to a lawyer or the police. It was to Frank Miller. Frank and I went through basic training together at Fort Bragg, a lifetime ago. We'd seen the worst of each other and the best of each other. After the Army, I went into trucking, and he went into law enforcement, eventually becoming a detective before retiring and opening a small private investigation firm. He was the one person on earth I could trust with this, and the one person who wouldn't sugarcoat the truth. He'd been warning me about Leo for years. The kid's a grifter, Mal, he'd say over beers. He's got his mother's charm and a rattlesnake's soul. You're too soft on him. I'd always brushed it off, defending Leo, defending my promise to Sarah. Now I had to eat a whole flock of crows. He picked up on the second ring. Frank Miller Investigations. You're in trouble, I can help. His voice was the same gravelly baritone it had been for 50 years. Frank, it's Mal. Malcolm. Don't tell me you finally drove that vintage pickup into a ditch. Worse, I said. Leo. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, then a heavy sigh. All right, How bad is it? What do you need me to do? He didn't say I told you so. He would, eventually, but he knew from the tone of my voice that now wasn't the time. He was my friend first, my critic second. I told him everything. The deed, the signature, the video. When I finished, the only sound was his breathing. The little bastard, he finally said, his voice flat and hard. He actually did it. Okay, Mal. First thing, do not confront him. Don't call him, don't text him. Let him think he's the smartest man in the world. Second, make 3 copies of that video. 1 on a hard drive you keep with you, 1 you give to me, and 1 you store in a safe deposit box. This is your ace in the hole. We don't play it until the pot is big enough. We met the next morning at a greasy spoon diner halfway between my warehouse and his office. Over burnt coffee and bacon we laid out the groundwork. Frank's instincts were the same as mine. Going to the police was an option, a messy, public, and potentially slow one. A civil suit was another. But Frank saw the bigger picture. This isn't about just getting him on forgery, Mal, he said, leaning forward, his eyes intense. This is a strategic problem. Your nephew is a cornered animal. 100 grand, you said, for an import scheme. That smells like loan sharks. Desperate people don't try to forge a deed for a multi-million-dollar property unless they are in a very, very deep hole with people who don't write polite letters of demand. He was right. The sheer audacity of the crime spoke of a terror that went beyond simple greed. He wasn't just trying to get rich, he was trying to save his own skin. I want you to find out who he's in bed with, I said. I want to know everything. Who holds his leash, how tight it is, and what they plan to do with it. Frank nodded, a grim smile playing on his lips. Consider it done. This is more fun than chasing cheating husbands. While Frank started digging into the dark corners of Leo's life, I took the second step. I hired a lawyer, not my usual guy, the one who handles my shipping contracts and liability insurance. I needed a specialist. Frank recommended a woman named Anya Davies. He described her as a piranha in a pantsuit. She was a corporate litigator who specialized in high-stakes fraud and asset recovery. Our first meeting was in her sterile downtown office that smelled of money and lemon cleaner. I told her the story, and she listened without interruption, her face a mask of professional neutrality. When I finished, I pushed the hard drive with the video footage across her polished mahogany desk. She inserted it into her laptop and watched the whole 10-minute horror show. She didn't flinch, she just watched, her eyes narrowed. When it was over, she closed the laptop and looked at me. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice crisp and devoid of emotion, "legally, your nephew is an imbecile. This is not a case of he said. This is a slam dunk. We can have him arrested for uttering a forged instrument, fraudulent conveyance, and breaking and entering. He'd be looking at significant jail time." I waited. There was a but coming. "But," she continued, "an arrest brings this into the public record. It becomes a criminal case, and you lose a degree of control. The district attorney's office runs the show. Based on what you've told me about the potential involvement of, let's call them unsecured creditors, a public spectacle might not be in your best interest. It could put you and your business in their crosshairs." She was confirming my own instincts. If I simply had Leo thrown in jail, his creditors would be left with a bad debt and a grudge. They might come looking for their money another way, and my warehouse would still be the big, juicy target. "So what's the alternative?" I asked. Miss Davies steepled her fingers. "The alternative is we treat this not as a crime but as a hostile takeover attempt. We let your nephew make his move. We let him present this fraudulent document to his partners. We let him incriminate himself so thoroughly that when we lower the boom he has no choice but to do exactly what we say. We don't just want to win, Mr. Sterling. We want to control the terms of his surrender." A piranha in a pantsuit. Frank was right. A cold, vicious smile touched my lips for the first time in 2 days. "Miss Davies," I said, "I think we're going to get along just fine." A week later, Frank called me. "I've got a name for you," he said. No preamble. Alexei Petrov. He's not the top of the food chain, but he's a significant player in the local Russian syndicate. He runs loan sharking and protection rackets out of a string of shady nightclubs and auto body shops. He's not a guy you want to owe money to. Our boy Leo owes him $150,000, not $100. The $100 was for the initial loan, the $50 is the juice, and it was due last week. It was worse than I thought, so much worse. Leo hadn't just made a bad deal, he'd made a deal with the devil, and now he was trying to pay for it with my soul. Frank continued. My source says Petrov was getting impatient. He gave Leo a new deadline: get the money, or get some real collateral, or he'd start taking payments in pieces. Pieces of Leo, that is. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The forgery wasn't a get-rich-quick scheme. It was a desperate last-ditch attempt to hand Alexei Petrov the keys to my kingdom before Petrov sent his goons to collect their pound of flesh. He was going to serve me up on a platter to save himself. That night, I went home, and I took the deed from my safe. I went back to my office, long after everyone had gone home. I placed the forged document back on my desk blotter, exactly where Leo had left it. But I did one small thing. I turned it just slightly, a few degrees askew from where it was in the video. A tiny signal, a breadcrumb only I would recognize. Then I went home and waited. I was no longer the victim. I was the man setting the trap. The quiet in my warehouse was back, but now it felt different. It was the quiet of a hunter in a blind, waiting for his prey to step into the clearing. The next few days were a masterclass in self-control. I had to act the part of the oblivious, doddering old fool my nephew believed me to be. The hardest part was the family dinner. My brother George, his wife, and their kids, along with Leo, had a standing Sunday dinner at a local Italian place. Canceling would have raised suspicion, so I went. It was agonizing. Leo was a caricature of the concerned nephew. He pulled out my chair for me. He made sure my water glass was always full. He kept asking about my health, his voice dripping with false sympathy. You're working too hard, Uncle Mal, he said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. You really should think about taking a step back. Let someone else handle the stress. The irony was so thick, I could have cut it with my steak knife. I saw my brother George nod in agreement. George was a good man, but soft. He'd always seen my dedication to the business as a kind of madness. He had no idea the kind of snake he was defending. I just smiled, a weary, tired smile I'd practiced in the mirror. You might be right, Leo, I mumbled, pretending to be a little confused. This place, it's a lot these days. A lot to keep track of. I saw a flicker of triumph in Leo's eyes. He thought he had me. He thought the old man was finally fading, ready to be put out to pasture. The whole meal was a charade. I was playing the role of the perfect victim, and he, the role of the perfect predator. 2 days later, the trap sprang. I was at my desk when my private line rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring 3 times, then picked it up. Sterling, I said. The voice on the other end was low and gravelly with an accent that scraped vowels like they were barnacles on a ship. Mr. Malcolm Sterling. Speaking. My name is Mr. Petrov. I believe we are business partners now. My heart gave a little thump, not of fear but of adrenaline. It started. I played my part. Business partners? I'm afraid you have the wrong number. I don't have any partners. There was a dry, humorless chuckle. Your nephew Leo says otherwise. He has been very generous. He has signed over a controlling interest in your warehouse property to cover a debt. He says you are ready to retire, that this is a family arrangement. He was so confident. Leo had fed him the story, and he'd swallowed it whole. Why wouldn't he? An old man on his way out. A greedy nephew. It was a tale as old as time. Leo, I said, injecting a note of befuddled panic into my voice. My nephew. He signed something? I don't understand. This must be a mistake. He helps out sometimes, but he has no authority to sign anything. It is no mistake, Petrov said, his voice hardening. We have a legal deed. Signed by you. I let a long silence hang in the air. I let him imagine me, a confused old man, trembling in his office. A deed, I finally stammered. I haven't signed any deed. This is crazy. Perhaps we should meet. To clear this all up, Petrov suggested, his voice now carrying a clear undertone of threat. You, me, and the boy. We will look at the paperwork together, make sure everything is in order. This was it. The moment of truth. Yes, I said. My voice shaky. Yes, we should. We need to sort this out. Tell me when and where. Your office. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. And Mr. Sterling, make sure you are alone. We do not need lawyers. This is a simple business matter. Okay, I whispered. Tomorrow, at 2. I hung up the phone. My hand was steady as a rock. The fish had taken the bait, the hook, the line, and the sinker. Now all I had to do was reel him in. Before I could deal with Petrov, I had to secure my flank. The family. Leo had used the idea of family as a weapon against me for years, a shield of obligation I could never penetrate. It was time to dismantle that shield. I knew that if Petrov's plan went south, Leo's first move would be to run to the family, to cry, to play the victim, to paint me as the cruel old uncle who had ruined his life. I couldn't let that happen. I needed to control the narrative. I called my brother George. George, I said, my voice serious. I need to call a family meeting. Tonight, my house. It's urgent. And George, don't tell Leo. The silence on his end told me he understood the gravity. George, for all his softness, wasn't stupid. He knew I wasn't a man for unnecessary drama. That evening, they all filed into my living room. George and his wife, Martha, and my 2 cousins who held minority shares in the company from an investment my father had made decades ago. The mood was tense. They looked at me, expecting some announcement about my health or my retirement. I didn't waste time. I didn't show them the video. That was my trump card, and I wasn't playing it for them. This wasn't about proving a crime. It was about demonstrating a threat. I laid out the facts calmly and clinically. Leo has a problem, I began. A very serious one. He's in debt, to the tune of $150,000. Martha gasped. George's face went pale. That's not the worst part, I continued. My voice level. The people he owes money to are not bankers. They are criminals. Professional criminals. I let that sink in. I slid a thin file folder, prepared by Frank, onto the coffee table. It didn't contain the video. It contained printouts of Alexei Petrov's known associates, news clippings of trials he'd been connected to, public records of his shell corporations. It was a portrait of a very dangerous man. Leo, in his desperation, has attempted to use Apex Logistics as collateral to pay this debt. He has forged a document claiming I am transferring the property to him, which he then intended to sign over to these men. The room was silent. You could hear a pin drop. The image I was painting wasn't of a mischievous nephew making a mistake. It was of a fool who had invited a pack of wolves to the family's front door. George picked up one of the papers, a mugshot of one of Petrov's enforcers. He looked like he was going to be sick. My God, Mal, he whispered. I had no idea. None of us did, I said, and it was true. I had been willfully blind for years. He has put this entire company, our family's legacy, and potentially all of us at risk. Tomorrow, these men are coming to the warehouse to claim what they think is theirs. I have a plan to handle it, but I need to know, before I walk into that room, that this family stands together, that we are united in protecting what our father and I built, and that means Leo is for now outside the circle. He cannot be trusted. He cannot be helped until this threat is neutralized. I looked around the room, from face to face. I saw fear, but I also saw something else. Clarity. The fog of family obligation was burning away in the harsh light of reality. They weren't just seeing Leo the troubled screw-up anymore, they were seeing Leo the existential threat. It was Martha, George's wife, who spoke first. Her voice was firm. What do you need us to do, Malcolm? It was the question I was waiting for. For now, nothing. If Leo calls you, if he texts you, you don't answer. You don't engage. He brought this storm to our door and he has to face it. Alone. I will handle Petrov. But I need to know you all have my back. George looked at me, his eyes filled with a new kind of respect. The soft, pitying look he usually gave me was gone. Of course, Mal, he said, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. He's your nephew, but this is our family. We're with you. One by one, my cousins nodded their agreement. The exodus was complete. Leo was now an island, and the tide was coming in. As expected, the frantic messages started late that night. The first was a text to me. Petrov called me, said you're meeting him tomorrow. What WTF is going on? I didn't answer. An hour later, my phone rang. Leo, I ignored it. Then came the text to George, which George immediately forwarded to me. George, Uncle Mal is trying to screw me. You have to talk to him. He's going to ruin everything. George, true to his word, did not reply. The final wave came after midnight, a series of increasingly unhinged voicemails on my phone. First pleading, Uncle Mal, please, pick up the phone. We can fix this. I can explain. It was a misunderstanding. Then angry, you old bastard, you're going to get me killed. Is that what you want? You promised Mom. You promised her. And finally, a pathetic, whimpering threat. You do this to me, and I'll tell everyone what you are. A selfish old man who'd rather see his own family destroyed than share a little bit of his precious fortune. I listened to the messages, my face impassive. It was just noise. The desperate squealing of a rat caught in a trap of his own design. I deleted them all and went to bed. I slept better than I had in years. The conference room at Apex is my domain. It's functional, not luxurious. A long, heavy oak table, 12 sturdy chairs, a state-of-the-art projection system, and one wall of floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the warehouse floor. It's a place where I've made million-dollar deals and fired incompetent managers. It's a room that radiates my authority. At 1:45 p.m., my team was in place. I sat at the head of the table. To my right was Anya Davies, her briefcase open, her demeanor as cold and placid as a frozen lake. To my left was Frank, dressed in a blazer that did little to hide the bulk of his shoulders. He wasn't armed, not officially, but his presence was more intimidating than any weapon. He was just a concerned business associate. The three of us sat in silence, waiting. The quiet was back. The quiet of absolute readiness. At 2 o'clock sharp the door opened. Leo shuffled in first, his face pale and blotchy. He wouldn't look at me. He looked like a man being led to his own execution. Behind him were two men who filled the doorway. One was older, impeccably dressed in a tailored gray suit. He had silver hair, cold blue eyes, and an air of bored menace. This had to be Alexei Petrov. The other was a mountain of muscle poured into a cheap black suit, his neck as thick as my thigh. He was there to be intimidating, and he was very good at his job. They entered the room, and the atmosphere changed. The air grew heavy, charged with unspoken violence. Petrov's eyes swept the room, taking in me, then Frank, then settling on Miss Davies. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. I said no lawyers. Miss Davies is my executive vice president. I said smoothly, the lie coming easily. She's present at all major contract negotiations. Petrov gave a slight, dismissive shrug and sat down opposite me, the mountain standing behind his chair. Leo took a seat at the far end of the table, as far from me as possible. So, Petrov began, getting straight to it. There seems to be some confusion. The boy here says you are gifting him the business. You say you are not. Let us clear this up. He slid the forged deed across the oak table. It stopped directly in front of me. This is your signature, yes? Leo finally looked at me, his eyes pleading. He was begging me to play along, to save him. He still thought he had that power over me. He still thought my promise to his mother was a leash he could pull. I didn't even look at the paper. I looked at Leo. "Leo," I said, my voice calm and quiet, "tell him the truth." Leo flinched as if I'd hit him. He swallowed hard. It's what we discussed, Uncle Mal," he stammered, his eyes darting towards Petrov. "Your retirement. The transfer of assets." Petrov let out a sigh of theatrical impatience. "Enough games. Old man, you signed the paper. We have a deal. The property now belongs to the boy, and the boy's debt now belongs to me. This warehouse is mine until he pays. It is simple." He leaned back in his chair, the picture of absolute power. This was the moment, the culmination of months of pain and weeks of planning. I reached into my jacket pocket and took out a small black remote control. I aimed it at the large 4K television on the wall. "You know, Mr. Petrov," I said, my voice still conversational, "the thing about my business is that it's all about verification. Bills of lading, shipping manifests, signatures. You have to be able to trust that a signature is real. I've found that video is an excellent tool for verification." I pressed the button. The screen flickered to life. The image was crystal clear, a perfect high-definition view of my office in the middle of the night. My office door swinging open. Leo. A collective intake of breath in the room. I watched Leo's face. All the color drained from it, leaving a waxy gray mask of pure terror. Petrov and his mountain were watching the screen, their expressions shifting from confusion to rapt attention. We all watched in silence. We watched Leo sit in my chair. We watched him practice my signature, over and over, his frustration mounting. We watched him finally, painstakingly, forge my name on the very document that was now sitting on the table between us. I let the video play all the way to the end, until Leo had left and the office was empty again. I clicked the remote and the screen went black. The silence in the room was absolute. It was thick, heavy, and suffocating. Leo was frozen, his mouth slightly open, his eyes wide with horror. The mountain behind Petrov's chair shifted his weight, the sound unnaturally loud. Petrov's cold blue eyes moved from the blank screen to the deed on the table, and then slowly to Leo. The bored menace was gone. In its place was a look of such cold, concentrated fury that it made the hair on my arms stand up. He hadn't been cheated out of a property. He had been made to look like a fool. A man in his line of work cannot afford to look like a fool. "So," Miss Davies said, her voice cutting through the silence like a shard of glass. She slid a new, much thicker file folder across the table toward Petrov. "That is a copy of the video you just saw, along with a formal criminal complaint for multiple felonies we were planning to file this afternoon. My client," she gestured to me, "is the victim of a rather clumsy fraud. A fraud you are now attempting to enforce. That makes you an accessory." Petrov didn't even look at the file. His eyes were locked on Leo. "However," Miss Davies continued smoothly, "my client is a reasonable man. He has no quarrel with you, Mr. Petrov. His only issue is with his nephew. He is willing to forget this meeting ever happened, and this criminal complaint will never see the light of day, on one condition." She paused for effect. "You take your problem," she nodded towards Leo, "and you solve it permanently, and you never ever set foot on this property or contact my client again." Petrov was silent for a long moment. Then, a slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. He finally understood. He looked at me, a glimmer of professional respect in his cold eyes. "A pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Sterling," he said. He stood up. He nodded to the mountain. The mountain moved around the table and yanked Leo out of his chair by his arm. "Wait, no," Leo screamed, finally finding his voice. "Uncle Mal, you can't, please." The mountain started dragging him towards the door. The last thing I heard before the door closed was Petrov's voice, low and chilling. "You and I have much to discuss, little man. You have wasted my time, and you have cost me money." Then the door clicked shut, and they were gone. In the aftermath, the quiet returned to my warehouse. It was a different kind of quiet now, a clean quiet, the quiet of a fever having broken. Frank clapped me on the shoulder. "You did good, Mal. You did real good." Miss Davies was already packing her briefcase, her work done. "The matter is concluded, Mr. Sterling. I'll send you my invoice." I just sat there, at the head of my table, in my conference room, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I never saw Leo again. My brother George got a single garbled text a week later from a burner phone, saying Leo was going out of the countries for a job opportunity and not to contact him. That was it. He was just gone. The problem had been outsourced. I know I should feel something, guilt maybe, but I don't. I feel peace. I think a lot about that promise I made to my sister Sarah. For years I thought it meant protecting Leo from the world. I was wrong. The world is a place of consequences. My promise should have been to teach him that, to guide him towards strength and responsibility, not to build a padded room around him where he could never fail, never learn, never grow. My enabling didn't save him. It crippled him. It turned him into a weak, greedy man who thought a stolen key was a substitute for hard work. It wasn't about the revenge, not really. It was about surgery. It was about cutting out a cancer that was threatening to consume everything I had ever built. It was about finally understanding that you cannot set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, especially when they're the one holding the matches. They say blood is thicker than water. That's what we're all taught. But I've learned something else. Sometimes that blood is tainted. Sometimes the family well has been poisoned by greed and entitlement. And you have a choice. You can keep drinking from it, hoping it won't kill you, or you can have the courage to walk away, to find a cleaner spring. My name is Malcolm Sterling, and I chose to walk away. I chose to protect my legacy, my life's work, and my own peace of mind. I'm 68 years old, and for the first time, I feel like I'm truly in charge of my own life. It's a lesson that came late, but I'm grateful I learned it. And that's my story. Maybe you've had a Leo in your life. Maybe you've felt that pressure to sacrifice your own happiness for a family member who gives nothing back. It's a tough spot to be in, but I'm here to tell you that you have more strength than you think. Your life is your own, and you have the right to defend it. If you've been through something similar, I'd be interested to read about it in the comments below. It helps to know you're not alone. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories about folks who decided they'd had enough. Thanks for listening.